The Free Society programming at Hannibal LaGrange University is focused on promoting the ideals of a free society. We focus on three foundations of a free society, which are the democratic form of government, the free market economic system, and cultural institutions like the church. The speakers we bring to campus and events we host emphasize concepts within these three foundations, often viewing them through the lens of a biblical worldview, which is central to the mission at Hannibal LaGrange University. It's my pleasure to introduce our Constitution Day speaker, Senator Cindy O'Loughlin. Senator O'Loughlin was elected in 2018 and again in 2022 to represent Northeast Missouri in the Senate. In 2022, she was elected by her peers to serve as a majority floor leader, the first female to hold the position in state history. She is credited with improving the efficiency of the Missouri Senate during her first year serving in the role. Please join me in welcoming Cindy O'Loughlin.
I don't know if you've observed the Missouri Senate, but I don't know if it's gotten any more efficient since I was majority leader. But if you have watched it, I mean, I didn't shut my phone off. Sorry about that. I think the Missouri Senate is a good kind of microcosm of the rest of the world, which is people arguing on both ends of the spectrum. I don't know if you pay much attention to politics, but if you do, there's people over here that want what they want, and that's the only solution that they're willing to consider. And there's people over here who feel the very same way. And then there's a fairly large group of people in the middle, but you don't hear much about them. So the Senate has kind of functioned that way for the last several years. I just ended my 6th session. I have 2 more sessions and then I'll be termed out. And from my own perspective, and I'm going to get to Constitution here in a minute, but from my own perspective, I think politics has sort of taken the place of religion and taken the place of almost of scripture. Everybody's involved in politics, and you've got to do this and you've got to do that and you've got to make things right, when in actuality, a lot of our problem is a heart problem. A lot of the things that happen in our society, I believe, are the direct result of ignoring scripture. And I know that kind of sounds like a simple answer, but you understand that, or you wouldn't be going to school here. And you are the kind of people that are going to finish your education here and become mature Christian leaders in our country, in whatever walk of life you decide to pursue. And I have to tell you, it's kind of rough out there, but we really need you, and I highly admire you for being here, and I highly respect the work that's being done here. Because without the basis of truth, everything else is just, whatever you decide it is, you decide what your truth is, and you decide what your truth is, and there's really no basis for truth. And we end up in a society filled with chaos, which kind of is a little bit where we're at right now. So the Constitution basically is a document designed to restrain government, basically, and to ensure that the rights of the people who live here are not trampled on. But as I say, if you have been watching what is going on in today's political world, you'll notice that it's not really being followed. And I think one of the greatest threats to our individual rights is the ever-increasing amount of executive orders that our presidents issue. So there's a separation of powers outlined in the Constitution, and it's there for a reason. It's a check and balance system to make sure that no one part of the government gets out of line. But you'll notice that what's happening is our presidents have started signing executive orders. Executive orders are not automatically reviewed by the courts. So if someone thinks an executive order is out of line, then they have to go to the court, and it can take a lot of time. In the meantime, that executive order is in force and affecting your life. So I have a little paper here about this. Executive orders are directives that are issued by the president to manage the operations of the federal government. While they are a legitimate tool of executive power, critics of the executive orders argue they undermine the Constitution. And here's some of the ways that that happens. It's an overreach of executive power. It's a violation of the separation of powers. The Constitution establishes a system of checks and balances among the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. Executive orders can sometimes, and I would say do often, bypass Congress. Congress is who we elect to go to Washington to implement the things that we believe should be implemented, and it goes right past that, effectively allowing the president to make laws when that power is reserved for the legislative branch. This concentration of power in the executive undermines constitutional principle of separation of powers. It involves unilateral decision-making. Presidents have used executive orders to implement significant changes without the input or approval of Congress. This gives the appearance that the president is governing unilaterally. It's not only the appearance, that's actually what is happening. It's an erosion of congressional authority, a weakening of legislative power. The frequent use of executive orders, especially on important issues, weakens the role of Congress in deliberating, vetting potential changes in law. When presidents use those to bypass legislative gridlock, it diminishes the role of the people's representatives in the decision-making process. So here's an example kind of down on the state level when we talk about gridlock. We refused to pass recreational marijuana. We refused to expand Medicaid. And as you might guess, since I'm a leader in the Senate, the press comes and talks to me fairly often if I let them catch me, because they're always trying to catch me, make me say something that they can portray differently than I meant it. And they're like, well, the people are going to have to take this into their own hands because you refused to do your job. And I said, wait a minute. We are doing our job. Our job is to legislate and create an environment where people can thrive on their own without the interference of government. Expanding Medicaid is a budget buster and creates a lot more dependence on government. We think people should be independent and free to make their own decisions. And when you make your own decisions, you also pay the consequences. That's some of the way that the press tries to characterize the things that we do. He felt we should pass it, and since we didn't pass it, he was trying to tell me that we weren't doing our job. No, we are doing our job. We refuse to pass it. The temporary nature of laws is affected by executive orders. They can be easily reversed by subsequent presidents. I'm going to let you guess, how many executive orders do you think Barack Obama issued? Just a guess. I'm going to call on you. No, you. How many executive orders do you think Obama issued? 10. He issued 42. How many do you think President Trump issued? More than 10. 220. So far, Biden, when he could understand what he was doing, I had to throw that in there, has issued 142 executive orders. So what happens kind of started with President Obama. He issued some, many which I would have disagreed with. President Trump gets elected, he reverses them, and also reverses a lot of other things he doesn't like. And for the most part, I would probably agree with those. However, he's circumventing the process just like the others are. You can't say, okay, this is a good thing when somebody does it that I like, and people do kind of tend to say that kind of thing. But if they don't like you, then you can't do it. No, this is another manifestation of truth. If it's wrong, it's wrong. And really, it's wrong. The executive orders contrast with the legislative process where the laws are passed through a much more deliberative process, and they're harder to repeat, ensuring stability and continuity in governance. We often are contacted with, can you pass a law to do this? Can you pass a law to do that? I mean, and some of them are truly absurd requests. And that's what I meant when I started this by saying politics has kind of taken the place of religion. The basis of truth is found in the Bible. And when you start to veer off from that and you make decisions that are in direct conflict, you're going to have an ever-increasing number of problems. And then people want to come in to us and say, you need to pass a law to stop this. I mean, all kinds of things. And then on the other hand, they'll say, we have too many laws. Well, yes, we do. We need to get back to the basis of truth. There's a lack of judicial oversight. Limited immediate judicial review. While executive orders can be challenged in court, the judiciary does not review every order automatically. Often a court case needs to be brought forward, which takes forever. And in the interim, the executive order has already caused significant impacts. And I'll give you an example. How many of you either drive or have in your family an electric vehicle? That's kind of what I figured. That would have been my guess. So, you know, the progressives would like for everyone to be driving an electric vehicle. And so the president makes statements like, by 2030, all of our vehicles will be electric. Do you see any problem with that? There's a lot of problems with that. Number one, we can't produce enough power to power the current need that we have for our homes, for our businesses. And if we are going to transition to all electric vehicles, they're going to have some place to plug in and charge. And we don't have that. So at the same time that he's telling car manufacturers, and believe me, when the president says, this is what we're going to transition to this is what's going to happen, the force of government can be overwhelming. So then your car manufacturers start thinking, okay, we've got to start, figuring out a way to build electric vehicles. Well, nobody wants them. I mean, they're okay in the suburbs or in the city. I think they work maybe okay. But if you have any weather extremes, we have weather extremes. Or if you're going to drive very far in a weather extreme, there's basically nowhere to charge them up. So now the car dealers, I'll use Ford as an example because I have a friend that's a Ford dealer. Ford tried to say to everybody, you're going to put this many electric vehicles on your lot. And here's what you have to pay in order to have those vehicles on your lot. Well, a lot of the dealers went ahead and did that, but some of them did not do it. namely my friend. He didn't do it. Well, so the people that did do it paid a large fee to have those vehicles, and now they're still sitting there with nobody buying them. And so then they came back to my friend, who's a Ford dealer, and said, you know, we'll let you have these cars for free, basically. You don't have to have a carrying charge if you'll just put them on your lot. And he refused. So now we have this upset in the market, which creates economic chaos, which then filters down into your life and my life. This is the problem with a president trying to speak into law or speak into regulation. This is what we're all going to do now. It results in chaos. The delay in judicial oversight can allow unconstitutional orders to remain in effect for longer periods. An ambiguous constitutional basis. The Constitution does not explicitly mention executive orders. Their legitimacy is generally derived from the president's duty to faithfully execute the law. However, that's a very vague authorization and leads to differing interpretations of what actions are actually constitutionally permissible under executive orders. And so then we're tied up in court. And this kind of thing just continues creating mayhem because we did not follow the checks and balances of the Constitution. There's a potential for abuse, emergency powers and crisis management. After 9/11, there was quite a outcry because the government wanted to dramatically increase their surveillance of everything that everybody does, basically. And that's why to this day, when we go to the airport, we have to, goodness, take off your shoes, and I mean, you just go through all kinds of things. And a lot of people feel that this is an overstep of authority. But in an emergency situation, it's very unlikely that the court is, even if it does review it, it's very unlikely that they're going to reverse it. So the bottom line there is watch out who you vote for. In times of crisis, presidents often rely on executive orders. It might be necessary for swift action, but it also opens the door to potential abuse of power. Executive orders in such contexts have sometimes been used to curtail civil liberties. Who can forget COVID? I think if that did not open people's eyes to abuse of power, I don't know what would. And at the time, and I talked about that, was I here last year or 2 years? 2 years ago, I talked about that. You know, your health department decided what you could and couldn't do. Health departments are run by some of the people that are running health departments have no background in health. I mean, maybe they're just an administrator, and they're making decisions for your life, canceling things, telling you have to stay home. How ridiculous. I pushed back against that pretty hard, and I continue to say that was one of the worst things that ever happened in this country. Executive orders in such contexts have sometimes been used to curtail civil liberties, limit your free speech. We see that happening a lot. You know, you kind of have to toe the line, and you have to agree with people that, you know, probably most of us in here don't agree with. And if you say anything that doesn't go right along with that story, you know, then all heck breaks loose. Limits free speech and infringes on your other constitutional rights. This has been seen in instances like when we had internment during World War II and certain actions during the War on Terror. And I would add COVID. Circumventing public accountability. Unlike the law passed by Congress, which involves a lot of public debate and transparency, executive orders are often issued with minimal discussion. So if there's anything that you don't want, it's a politician. I'm not trashing all politicians. all politicians. But a lot of people get into politics and maybe they don't have very much experience with actual real life. And so they've all got a lot of good ideas. Everybody there's got a good idea. And my response to that when someone comes to me with a good idea is, tell me about your good idea. And I want to know, how will that good idea work from the very beginning to the very end? Well, inevitably, a lot of times, it's a terrible idea. And I don't know how I got elected to leadership, because I just say that's a terrible idea, and we're not going to do that. You know, a lot of times it depends on somebody else paying for it. Well, we're already paying for a lot of things. Let's kind of put the brakes on that. Conflict with state laws and rights. The Constitution establishes a system of federalism in which power is supposed to be divided between the federal government and the states. But we're ignoring that. Some executive orders, especially those that deal with issues traditionally reserved for the state, create conflict. And here's an example. Power generation. The people who think we should all have an electric vehicle and all that also think that we need to shut down our clean coal plants, which provide us with reliable energy generation at an affordable price. They want all of those shut down. And they're shutting them down through actions of the EPA, which is very hard to fight. So they're shutting down the coal plants and they are installing solar farms. So they are covering thousands of acres of productive farmland with solar panels, which I despise, frankly. They only work if the sun is shining, and it is beyond me why food security is not a higher priority to us than apparently, the government has deemed a priority. We're covering up our food production with solar panels, thousands of acres of solar panels. Well, and windmills. And they only work when the wind is blowing. Well, traditionally, during times of extreme weather, neither one of those things is working. Then what? Well, what happens is we have blackouts, rolling blackouts. And I've made it a personal goal of mine to put a stop to that. I mean, that's one of those things that you cannot do on, that is the role of government. It is our responsibility to be sure that we can generate enough power that you can turn your lights on, you can turn your air on, you can have your heat on when you need it, you can power your business. It's crazy. And these rolling blackouts are coming to a neighborhood near you. Now, the reason we don't have them a lot in our area is because we depend on the co-ops largely for power, and they are largely powered by coal. So they're hanging in there. Everyone is building additional gas plants because our overlords at the EPA have said, we could do that. But my issue here is, in extreme instances, people die when the power goes off. For instance, Winter Storm Uri in Texas, where, they're all about sun and windmills and everything. And, okay, but, somebody needs to plan for what happens when that's not working. And some estimates say as many as 500 people died. Did you see that in the news anywhere? I doubt it. Those kinds of things are not reported. It's a very dangerous situation. It doesn't seem like it today while we're sitting here and the lights are on and everything's working. But just think for a minute what all operates on electrical power. Everything. gas pumps, banks, grocery stores, everything. So we're going to fight that. My conclusion is that executive orders may be a necessary tool for managing the government, and they sometimes undermine the constitutional principles, principles of separation of powers, checks and balances. Their unchecked use risks concentrating too much power in the executive branch, weakens the role of your elected representatives, and potentially infringes on your individual and our state rights. Proper judicial and congressional oversight is essential. Sometimes I wonder, what are the people in Congress doing? What are they doing? But I know sometimes people say that about us too. So the checkbook resides in the House at the federal level. So my answer to the problem is cut their money off. If they don't have money, they can't do anything. Cut the money off. And I don't know how many of you go to the state fair. I like what goes on at the state fair, but it's always suffocating, so I'm always kind of like, I don't think I want to go, but I have gone the last 2 years, and a lot of our representatives from Washington are there. And I asked them, what are you doing to cut off the money to agencies like the EPA? They don't like that question. Well, tough. You're an elected person. Do something about it. Cut their money off. If we don't pay attention to not only individual rights, but individual responsibilities, then our country cannot be the great country that it's designed to be. I'm thankful that you all understand the source of truth, and you're going to face a lot of headwinds when you get out of here. You may be facing them while you're here. And my response to that is you cannot shrink back from that. Now, we did have a sermon this last Sunday about, we shouldn't be unkind, and sometimes things can be kind of unkind in the legislature. And I'm as guilty of it as anybody. I mean, sometimes you just think, do these people not have any common sense, or what's wrong with these people? But we have to speak the truth, and we have to speak the truth in love. And I would contend that if you're down to speaking the truth, a lot of times that's the hardest time to speak it in love. But that's why you have to have the word hidden in your heart, so that when that moment comes, you have the response that you need. We're fortunate that we know the Lord, and we know that He is in control. And sometimes when, I feel like I'm going to blow up or burn down, or something's going to happen, I just have to go back to my office and shut the door and pray about that kind of thing, and bring myself back to the point where I understand I'm not running the world. And I know who is running the world, and I know who ultimately will prevail. So, thank you.